As we continue our trek through the Mission Impossible series, we have finally arrived at Mission Impossible 3 from 2006, this time being directed by JJ Abrams. This is JJ Abrams' first big shot at a feature film franchise. At the time, Abrams was known for being the guy who created and was the head writer for Felicity, and then there was a show called Alias that some of you may remember, and I believe that that's the show that got him this gig, was Alias. You know, J.J. Abrams was a young up-and-comer, definitely a guy who was starry-eyed as far as, like, he really, really loved Spielberg and that type of action genre, and I thought that him doing this film was a big step for his career, and obviously we know that he went on to have a successful career, even though he's also been panned very similarly to other directors for kind of sticking to the same style. And of course, let's not forget the debacle that is the Star Trek sequels and the Star Wars sequels. It wasn't all his fault, but as an actual guy who, like, when I look at J.J. Abrams, he's a guy who, he's not the best writer at all, and maybe not even the best storyteller, but one of his strengths, I felt, is that he's great at setting up a scene. He's great at setting up shots. He's great at creating these set pieces that are memorable. He's really good with the camera. There are pros to the guy. You know, he's not just I don't think he's a horrible director when it comes to that. It's just that his storytelling, you know, leaves a lot to be desired. What's interesting is he's not the only guy who's had a controversial past. Speaking of writing, or that is future from here, this movie was written by Alex Kurtzman. Now, Alex Kurtzman wrote Transformers: Revenge of the Fallen, not a great movie, the original Transformers, Star Trek Into Darkness, and Amazing Spider-Man 2, among others. So here's a guy who is, much like JJ, very hit or miss. But with Mission Impossible 3, everything came together really well. Probably because Tom Cruise was heavily involved as a producer and had a ton of power behind the scenes. So he wasn't going to let this movie fail. And fail it did not. Of the original 3 Mission Impossible movies, this is my favorite. This is the best one for a number of reasons. I thought that the plot actually was very easy to get into. I thought that you really end up caring about the characters, and that's important. And I want to highlight one in particular, and that is the performance of Philip Seymour Hoffman. Now, Philip Seymour Hoffman passed away about 11 or so years ago. He really adds a texture to this movie and layers to this movie as a villain that make him easily up until this point, he's easily the best Mission Impossible villain compared to all the other movies. I mean, he's just amazing in this thing. In every scene he's in, like, he steals it. You know, it kind of reminds me a bit of Alan Rickman and how he was in Die Hard. And really, this movie feels a lot like Die Hard in some parts. But, you know, like, Alan Rickman, he wasn't the only great actor in Die Hard. I'm not saying he was, but he elevated that character of Hans Gruber to new heights. And Philip Seymour Hoffman in this movie does the same thing with Owen Davian. I thought he was just tremendous. Now, with J.J. Abrams being involved here, he's going to bring along his crew like he does for every movie. Greg Grunberg is in this movie. Kerry Russell is in this movie. Simon Pegg. These are all characters, they're actors that have worked with J.J. Abrams since the very beginning. Specifically, a couple on Felicity, and he gives them small roles in this film. I thought that the pacing for this movie was very much improved from the previous one, which is funny because the last film was John Woo, and there was a moments of fast pacing, but this one really is fast paced, but it's fast paced enough to where you don't lose track. It's not like fast paced to where there's too much going on, like for example, Abrams' 2019 movie, Rise of Skywalker, where there's just too much going on and it's like a 5 hour movie crammed down into 2.5 hours. No, this is fast paced, but there's just enough character work and just enough of Ethan to satisfy you. Also, the special effects in this one I thought were a step up from the previous ones. The big sequences here, like the big set pieces with the explosions and everything and the vehicles, it really does harken back to that final sequence of the first Mission Impossible movie, the original one that Tom Cruise did, but it sort of raises it to like the next level. It kind of reminds me, I guess a good example would be comparing Fast 5 to Fast and Furious 4. You know what I mean? Like Fast and Furious 4 kind of laid the groundwork for what would become the series, going forward. And then Fast 5 just took it to a new level with a crazy ending sequence with them trying to take the safe away from the drug lord down in Brazil. This was kind of like that evolution. And so now, as we proceed through the Mission Impossible series, the next three I've never seen before. Okay, so you'll be hearing my first-hand account of the next three, but I'm basically thinking that it's just gonna get bigger from here. I mean, I saw the trailers to a couple of them before. It's just gonna get bigger, more extravagant, more over the top, more dangerous. I thought this movie found a great balance. But really, it's the plot, I think, that holds it together the best. There have been action movies that have better plots. Most action movies have very simple plots. But this right here, if this is the Mission Impossible formula that we're going to get for the next few films, then I'm definitely on board, because even though, like I said, there have been many movies that have much better storylines, much better plots. There are movies that really kind of keep you on the edge of your seat, and sort of do a lot of things that keep you invested in that passenger seat as you're being driven around to the spectacle that is the film and the story. For Mission Impossible, this blows away the first two. And it's kind of crazy considering it's JJ Abrams, who has historically made movies that have bad plots. I mentioned already Into Darkness, and I mentioned The Rise of Skywalker. The Rise of Skywalker, as I said earlier, the pacing in that movie is breakneck, but in that one, nothing makes sense. And there's so many questions and so many misdirects. For a movie like Mission Impossible, there weren't anywhere near as many misdirects, but there were enough to keep me invested and to keep me still dialed into the story. So, of all people, I think Abrams delivers here. I think this is probably his best movie, I would say, probably because he didn't start this, so there's not really there's mystery boxes, but it's not like he started Mission Impossible 1 like he did The Force Awakens of the sequel trilogy. He's picking up after the previous two movies and putting his own flair into it. And I do think that the flair that he brings fits more with Mission Impossible. And I think it's very clever. And I think, I would say that it's very similar to Rian Johnson with Knives Out. These guys have the potential to do great things. Just keep them away from Star Wars. You know what I'm saying? Now, the next Mission Impossible, which is Ghost Protocol, is directed by Brad Bird, who is really, I guess, most famous for being a Disney guy. Like, he did The Iron Giant, he did The Incredibles, he did Ratatouille, a lot of the classic Pixar movies. He's stepping in here for I think this is his first live action movie with Mission Impossible 4. But I have not seen it, but I have had people tell me it is good. So I am looking forward to seeing it. So Mission Impossible 3, if you like the first one and you get through the first two, I do think Mission Impossible 3 will make you sort of feel like you didn't waste your time. If you're into like this type of action, suspense, spy thrillers, suspense thrillers. If that's what you like, this is where it's at. So Mission Impossible 3 delivers on all counts. That's it. Those are my thoughts. Feel free to leave yours. Take care.